Okay, good morning and welcome to day two of the Cinder PTG. So I had to move the secure RBAC discussion to Friday, and the only time we had is the last um, session starting at, well, it's sort of past what we usually do, so it's 1600 to 1700 on Friday. So sorry about that, but it'll be exciting and worthwhile is the bonus side of that. So anyway, so we'll be talking about other stuff today, and luckily we had to shuffle some things from yesterday, so we'll have some time. So I just wanted to mention the RDO community is sponsoring a fun event tomorrow. Today's Wednesday. Tomorrow at 1700 UTC, so after the sessions are over, and you can register. There's the link on the Etherpad. It's a trivia hour. I'm not sure exactly what form it takes, but anyway, it should be fun and exciting. And then I forgot to do a team photo at the happy hour yesterday. So we should do a team photo. They're nice to have, and the foundation likes them also. So I guess the question I'm thinking. So the problem with that is it's better to do a Meetpad because we get more faces in there than I get in a single screen of blue jeans. But when we switch, we always either lose people or people disappear. So I'm not sure when's a good time to do it. Possibly tomorrow during the driver maintainers open discussion and just before we meet with Glance. In fact, maybe we could do the cross-project meeting with Glance in Meetpad. And I think let's do that. And then, right, if you're not interested in what's going on with Cinder and Glance, you can leave after the picture. But we'll switch that to Meetpad. So I'll talk to Abhishek and set that up. Let me put a note. All right, so let me put that here. So okay, so those team photos show up in various places. So you might want to get in on the action so that your lovely face can be spread around the internet. Okay, and then I think that was it. The only thing I was going to add is as far as like taking breaks or something, right? If you feel the need to like take a break in between sessions, probably the best thing to do is just put a note on the Etherpad before the next topic saying, let's take a break. Because I'm good about having us take breaks when I want to take one, but I'm not so good about doing it for other people. So, so just, if you're right, it's going to be, anyway, so just put it on the Etherpad and then we'll know to stop when we hit that. And then Blue Jeans has a 2-hour recording limit anyway, so it will automatically pick up the next one. But it's better if we stop because then, right, the next thing starts at a nice place instead of in the middle of a discussion. So somebody needs to remind me around before 1500 to make sure that we stop the recording and restart another one. So that'll probably, that's the cross-project meeting with Nova today. Okay, so actually that's going to solve itself. Okay.
Yeah, and I need to drop at that point, so
okay.
I'll remind you too.
Okay, and then Lee put together a special Etherpad for that session, so there's a link here, so we'll use that, and then we're going to join Nova in their room using Zoom, so hopefully that will work for everyone. I'll probably have to telephone in. I don't know why Zoom isn't working for me for sound. So, all right, so we'll be joining. Let me put that on there just for people who come in late. And the way to get to the Nova Zoom room is just go to the PTG page and click on the Nova lozenge. Let me, so if you go there, you've got the list of events and stuff, and each of those team names is actionable. So if you click on it, you'll go there. So we'll go to the Nova room at 1500 today. Okay. All right. Before we get started, thanks everybody for signing in. I think we had like, well, I forget. I did look up the number. We had a good crowd yesterday. Okay.
I thought 25 at one point.
Yeah, I think between people coming and going, it may have hit like 32.
Wow.
Which is nice. So good. Okay. So I wanted to ask if there are any comments or second thoughts from yesterday. I didn't post the summary yet, so I'll do that. But we had a good discussion, I think, about what we need to do for Kubernetes and exposing some extra specs, and also the capabilities API. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do around that I think will start to pay off in the long run. So that's good. And then, yeah, let me add. Okay. All right. So I don't know why I feel compelled to fill time. Let me stop for a second. And if anyone has any comments or questions or follow-ups from yesterday's discussion or things you want to bring up, now's a good time. Okay, and I apologize. I'm eating breakfast as we go. Okay. Anyway, something occurs to you, there'll probably be some time later, and also Friday. So if you want to add something to the Friday, Friday section of the Etherpad, if you've got a question or something you want to return to, please go ahead and put it there, and then we won't forget to follow up. And then, of course, there's always the Cinder meetings and stuff like that. Okay.
I have one thing. I just saw that we're doing the team photo at 15:30 tomorrow.
Or is that bad for you?
Let me look.
Okay.
Nope, that's great.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay, good. Never mind.
Otherwise, I'd Photoshop you in, but I don't really know how to use Photoshop, so that would be.
No, I think we're good because the TC
Okay.
is 1300 and 1400, so I'll be back at 1500. So
Okay.
perfect. Cool. Thank you.
Good.
Oh,
and I did say,
nice.
I'm sorry.
I said I could Photoshop him in, but I can't guarantee it would look good.
You'd have a mustache, right?
Something.
Big handlebar mustache. Like who was that? The Piston. Those Piston guys always had the mustaches. All right. Right now I completely lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, what I was going to say was I sent something to the mailing list yesterday about Thursday being Driver's Day. So try to spread the word if you can. So we've got some driver topics stacked up. Adam from Pure is going to be talking about using their experience using Software Factory to run the third-party CI. So I think it's going to be a great session, and I hope a lot of people who have to maintain third-party CI show up, but we'll see. But anyway, it'll be interesting for us at least to see how that actually worked out, and how painless it was. Okay, I guess let's start the topic and my thing. Okay, so Cinder. Jay, did you update the PTG bot thing?
I can.
Okay, why don't you do that and then.
All right.
So now we'll be the removing the V2 API.
Your
Okay.
V is my command. All right.
thought you were asking me what command you need to use to do.
No. I said your wish is my command.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm just not used to that kind of service. Okay, so removing the block storage API v2, it's been deprecated, I don't know, since before I started working on Cinder. And we've been threatening to remove it. We came close, at least in the sense that we talked really seriously about it this time, and I sent out some stuff to the mailing list telling operators that it was going to be gone. As you probably noticed, it didn't happen. So we need to plan ahead. So a couple of things. I was going to remove, we agreed to, well, we should probably revisit this. Let me start putting notes here since I haven't, all right. So let's talk about the Cinder client. So we agreed to remove v2 support. So I sent a special thing to the mailing list about that. Gosh, I don't know, like in November maybe, or October or something. And didn't get any negative, nobody seemed to care. So somebody said, thanks for notifying us. It's good to see communication. And please review my patch. But they're about something completely different. But nobody seemed to worry about it. So I'm thinking we should still go ahead and do that. Now, what I ran into was I did a really stupid thing. I waited too long to do it till before M3. And then I also did a stupid thing. I started to do stuff and then kept doing more on the same patch and then kept doing more and then got into this state where everything was so completely screwed up that it became clear I needed to split it up into different patches, and I was out of time to do that. So I apologize, but this time it's going to happen. So the thing is, we got to do it before M1, because if we don't get it done early, it's never going to happen. Now, as far as what went on with the Cinder client, there are a couple of phases. So the way I would break it up is, the first thing is we have a general client class that does some stuff to figure out whether it should give you a v2 client or a v3 client. So that needs to be changed so it only gives you a v3 client. And there are a couple of bugs in there, but I think we should ignore them and fix them later. So that's one thing. Then the next thing is, we should probably remove the v2 client classes in the v2 subdirectory. So nobody, because if they're there, then somebody could use them. So that would have to go. And then the thing after that is, I think, remove all the v2 classes, because since the Python Cinder client is delivered to end users who use it to write Python programs to interact with Cinder, they're there and they're user facing, so they should disappear. And that's where things started to get pretty hairy, as you can imagine, because we've got some v3 classes are simply, the init is just an import of the v2 class. There are also some v2 classes whose init is just an import of a v3 class, which is a little strange. And then we got a weird mix where the v3s are superclasses of the v2s. So I'm thinking, so my first question to the team is, am I correct in thinking that we should have no classes that are named v2 if we don't support v2? I mean, we could just say that they don't really work, but.
Yeah, we've been shipping v3 for so many years that I think that's a reasonable approach at this point.
Okay. And then what I'm thinking is, I had started doing this, and then of course all the tests broke, and I got really confused about how to do this properly. But there are, for any of the v2 classes that are just being used in v3, where it's just an import of that class, those I can just move over. So that's easy. Any of the V2 classes that are imports of V3s, just delete. That's easy. And then the next question is, does it, well, I guess in terms of like time, I don't know that it, or I guess maybe it's a judgment call class by class. I'm thinking instead of having the V2 in the tree, I could name it base or common or something like that, and then just change the names of the classes that are imported. I mean, that's kind of cheesy, but that might be the best way to do it. And then if somebody's sufficiently motivated to clean that stuff out, they could do the big merge and turn everything into V3 only. Because I don't know, or maybe not. I mean, I don't know that those base classes are going to be interesting when we do V4, assuming that ever happens. So it may, well, anyway, okay. So I'm thinking what I would do before M1 for the Python Cinder client is the change in the auto detection of which client you get so that you only get V3. Remove the V2 client class for sure, and then put up another patch or series of patches doing these other changes. And then the state will be left in is roughly what we have now, except V2 will be named common or base or something. Does anybody have a preference for that? Or I guess you can tell me on the review, right? Because that would be an easy change to make.
I would just say to try to name it something where if it's stuff that we don't want people to actually pull in and use, that's kind of obvious.
Okay. Can you think of like, do not?
I'll have to look around in there to kind of see how it's structured again, but
Okay.
Just
Yeah,
call
if you,
it's stale.
Dale.
Stale, yeah.
In OSVIF, we have an internal module, and I assume we don't want anyone else to import to be put in there.
okay. That's a good name. Internal. Okay. All right. And then, yeah, and then we can decide if we want to keep it internal or merge it into V3, but that can be a whole separate thing. Because the main point is just to remove the support at this point. All right, thanks. That's a good idea. Okay, great.
And what was the?
Sorry,
Am I
was that?
audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the problem again with removing the V2 classes? Like we have just derived the V3 classes from V2 classes, so we can move that code. I can see there would be a problem with the test, but was there any other reason?
For just, I'm sorry, for just merging the internal directly into V3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just more work. So it's just a pretty crappy, it's not really an excuse, I guess. So I do it in stages. So I think it's going to be better, but also with the tests, because what I found out was that I thought I had this, it was going along really smoothly. And then I hit this point where everything went sideways and the tests were all screwed up and I got some really weird, yeah, anyway. And I think it's just because I did a really stupid thing in not breaking it up from the beginning into little small pieces. So that's really it. It's just going to be, it'll be easier to do it that way because I think, yeah, I mean, the problem is, now that I'm thinking about it, right, there's some tests that are V2 that really need to be tested in V3 and aren't. And so those have to be ported over. Well, anyway, so to answer your question, it's going to be a big enough pain. But I'd be happy for somebody else to pick that up after we get the basic things set up. Okay. All right. So that, I don't know. So I believe I can do that before V1. So that's what I'll work on, and I'll feel free to make snarky remarks to people requesting code reviews while I'm working on this. So I think I get the basic thing in place. We can get the first stuff merged, and then it'll make it easier for other people who want to pick it up to clean things up and eliminate technical debt. So that's the plan for the Cinder client. Right. Okay. So now the other thing is Cinder itself. Is Yvonne here? I think he had a conflict with Verizon. Now with Cinder itself, I mean, right, it's open source, so everybody can see those classes, but right, as users, I mean, it's not like the client where you expect people to actually use this stuff, right? So I don't see the class refactoring being such a big an issue in terms of being able to declare there's no V2. So it's mostly, I believe, I want to say, right, so it's simple, but there's going to be a shitload of tests that are going to be affected. I think we just need to work at the REST API layer and just eliminate, right, so we changed the versions so V2 isn't listed. We changed the mappings so that, right, if you request V2, you get, 404 or something. But I think everything else we can sort of leave in place because those classes are pretty intertwined. And it'll be kind of hairy to change them. But I think the main thing is, and what's important is to stop supporting the V2 API, or to be able to claim it's been removed from Cinder. So how we do things behind the curtain, I think, doesn't matter so much.
So a lot of that would just be about changing the config option around it, right?
I think so. I think it shouldn't be too bad. And I think one nice thing about this having gone on so long is that the transition to V3 is well known, I guess. Something's going to break, but I don't believe it's going to cause a catastrophe, which is another reason to do this before M1. So we release an M1 that has no block storage API v2 in it, and then people can see what happens. So for that one, it would be good to have a volunteer. So Ivan was interested in this, but I think he was also Horizon PTL, so that kind of ate into his free time. So yeah, so anyway, so think about, right, one nice thing is these are commits, even though they're removing stuff, so you can increase your contribution count and your standing in the rankings of Cinder contributors. Just as a, if you're competitive and pay attention, that kind of thing. Or even if you're not. So we can check with Yvonne, but I think yeah, I think if somebody else wanted to step up, he's not going to fight you over this.
Where's Sean when you need him? He loves removing code.
I know. It's too bad. Well, if we'd done this sooner, we could have had Sean remove everything. I'm sure Sean will be happy to review these though. So, yeah. So Rajat, with the you know what I'm thinking. I'm trying to say the API reference because you added all those functional tests that validate that the API reference sample requests and responses are accurate.
Yeah, that's only for V3.
Yeah, so we won't. Yeah, we'll just see how. So I don't know how intertwined stuff is. Well, anyway. So we'll need So two things. So we will need, well, I guess we could just like not run the tests for any of the V2 stuff if it gets too complicated to remove it, because the V3 tests depend on some things. Anyway,
Well, Brian,
yeah, Gorka.
V3.0 is exactly V2. So if we run into problems, we can just run pointed at the V3. Any V2 test should run with V3, and we actually should be testing V3.
Right. And that was another thing that happened, was that a bunch of tests in the Cinder client broke because I figured, right, they're V2, they should be able to handle V3.0 responses, and some strange things happened. So that's, I guess I'm sorry, I'm not being really clear here. What I think is we need two people. So we need to remove the stuff from the API reference. And I guess in a pinch, right, we could just do that by, right, the conf.py in doc source. So those pages just don't get generated. So maybe that's not such a big deal. But we will need to do that. And then there'll be some other documentation things. So maybe I can ask Naomi to just read through the docs for V2 references to flag them, so we make sure we remove that stuff.
So just a question on discoverability. Presumably the V2 endpoint is a separate endpoint in Keystone, right? So
Yes.
we're not going to have a micro version for this because the code is actually going away. There's no point in putting a micro version because none of the older micro versions will actually work, right? You're deleting the code from the repo itself.
Yes.
So the discoverability of this is it's not a new micro version. It's the V2 endpoint is not there, and any compliant client that's already checking for the endpoints should be able to just go over to V3.
Yeah. But that's a good point. We need to double check how it's going to be handled in Keystone, or at least by default, to make sure that the service catalog doesn't include it.
Yeah.
What does the OpenStack client do?
I think it just it shouldn't affect the OpenStack client because it's set up to just go to various clouds. So it should check for whatever it wants, V2 or V3, and then act appropriately. So it should already. Well,
I think the SDK will stem that over. Although if you're using the Cinder client directly from the OpenStack client, then I guess it'll depend on how this gets composed internally, if they're specifically using those V2 implementations.
Mm-hmm. So, well, all right. Let me. So, is it the QA team, or is there a special? Do you know, Sean, if there's a special?
I think the SDK team and the OSC team have now merged.
Okay.
So I think it's basically the SDK team that's manages that now.
All right. I'll send a specific thing to the mailing list, telling them this is going to happen for real this time, and I don't know. Yeah, and then they can let us know what the impact is, or if we need to discuss or whatever. But they should, yeah, it shouldn't be too bad because, well, it's never been the case though that there's been the V2 API hasn't been there in any of the recent OpenStacks. Okay.
Yeah, so they have a V2 and a V3 and a V1 folder.
Okay.
So it looks like they have parallel implementations, and then I would hope that, the V3 folder seems to be basically empty.
Oh.
So I was going to say I was hoping that the client.py would, just proxy to the correct implementation.
Right.
But maybe not. It might be using V3 via 3.0.
Right. Okay. Well, again, there'll be a real test of Gorka's theory that it will just be a seamless. If you use v3.0, it's just can't tell the difference from v2. Okay.
So one thing I also wanted to mention. So there are some. So we have a contrib directory also, and some of the V3 classes also inherit from that. So are we going to do anything about that with this V2 removal also?
No, I think the contrib stuff, the v2. So in Cinder itself, contrib and v2 can all stay there, unless somebody's like really motivated to do this. Just I don't see that we have the bandwidth as a project. But if somebody really wants to refactor, they can. But yeah, so those would just stay there.
Yeah, as a longer term thing, we do need to move some of that contrib stuff into the v3 API instead of
because we did change the URL for some of them so that they look like they're part of the official API instead of extensions. But we'll be more thorough about that once we are only working on v3. So I'm thinking that the organization of the classes can probably stay the same. And it's just the v3 classes will inherit from whatever's there because we're not removing any of that stuff at this point. And then as a separate project, someone can go through and start to clean that stuff out. And okay, so all right, so I gotta. Then Sean, I think Nova's pretty much using v3 now, right? I guess I should send something to Nova just to give them a heads up. I guess.
Yeah, we can bring it up, but I think so.
Yeah. I guess it won't impact them anyway, because as far as the API, well, I guess if they're using the Cinder client. All right, as long as I'm sending emails, might as well.
Do we have a cross-project session later today?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, later today. So that would be a good thing to mention. Let me put that in here. Okay, thanks. I guess maybe ironic. I don't know. Well, it'll be put out another general.
So I think we have confirmed that Horizon doesn't use V2, right?
Right. Yeah. So I think it's not a Horizon issue anymore.
We'll also need to probably keep Alan in the loop on 000 because it does endpoint deployment for these separately.
Yeah.
Something will have to get tweaked.
Actually, that's already been taken care of. I took the early message to heart that this work would have been done in Wallaby, so 000 already removes the V2 endpoint.
Cool.
All right, thanks.
Just looking at OSC quickly as well, they have a table of API versions, and it looks like they're importing the correct version of the client based on the version you set. So like if you have v3, it's importing Cinder client.v3.client.client. and then using that.
Okay.
So it looks like the V3 implementation is delegating most of the functionality directly to the V3 implementation in the Python Cinder client.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, so you still need a volunteer to handle the Cinder side. Although I guess we could revisit this on Friday if people want to think. I'm sorry, Rajat, what's your question about 3.4.2?
Yeah, so the links that Sean just shared, there are 1, 2, 3, and 3.42. I'm not sure why 3.42 is a separate API version there.
Oh.
Weird, like maybe they're recording the latest version that they support or something weird like that, but it's strange that it's there on its own.
Can you actually use 3.42 from OpenStack client?
Well, from OpenStack client, you can just override the micro version directly on the command line. But
You can,
I don't know if it will.
last time I looked at it, it didn't work for Cinder. I don't know if they fixed that.
Yeah, the last time I looked, which wasn't that long ago, there's like specific support for one microversion. Somebody needed one command and they added that one.
Maybe that's okay. So it's whatever's in 3.42.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty parsimonious way to do it.
Well, it's actually probably because of how they're doing that API version lookup. They should be doing a substring match, and I think they're just doing a straight version lookup on the dictionary key.
Mm-hmm.
I think the issue is that just because the API supports a microversion doesn't mean that the OpenStack client command line does.
That's also true.
Yeah.
It can set the microversion in the header response sense, but that doesn't mean it's actually sending the correct payload.
Right.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, maybe since in the future they'll only have to deal with V3, they don't have to split their efforts on V2 stuff.
I'm assuming they can delete V1, right?
I don't know what their when did we delete V1? So that was way before I got involved in Cinder. So is that like in Havana or something? I don't know how back.
I'm kind of just dismayed that there's patches to it from 13 months ago, so it implies that someone's running it.
So somebody's using it.
Yeah, the OpenStack client does this goofy thing where it attempts to import from Cinder client, and if it can't import, then it says, whoops, I guess I don't support that. I'll remove one from my list of supported API versions. Rude but effective.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any questions, observations? Etc. Is there anything obvious that I forgot?
I was trying to think through if there was any strategy needed for backport complications related to removing this. I think probably not really, because I don't think we end up doing many backports in this area anyway.
Yeah, I guess what's the new thing would be we would have to fix V2 bugs. I'm thinking the Cinder client.
It'll be a stable-only change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's rare enough that that's fine.
Yeah, yes, and if we follow Brian's suggestion for the Cinder server, where we basically just remove the mappings and we leave the Cinder Cinder-API-v2 directory, then even backports will work fine because we are not renaming anything. right now, at least not in the first patch, right?
Right.
The cost of that though is you're still going to have to make the unit test work for V2 when you're changing things in common code, and you may or may not want to keep doing that, right?
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, I want to emphasize, right? Whatever we do has to be finished before M1. So that's why I'm thinking we're not going to have a lot of time to do any kind of fancy refactoring. And then we can, as we come across these issues with backporting and stuff, it'll become probably painfully apparent what we need to do to make things either easier or different or whatever. But I think,
I mean, like, how often do you get V2 only bugs at this rate? Like, Nova just deleted Nova Networks, and we're already not really maintaining it, so we just got it out of the code base when we finally removed it.
mm-hmm.
And so far that hasn't caused us much pain. We got rid of an abstraction layer that could delegate to Nova Networks or to Neutron as part of that, and I have had to slightly modify patches, but it was really just changing the module name when I was backporting it because it was a different file name.
Okay.
So.
All right. Okay. I guess that's it for this topic. Any general questions or observations or?
Oh, I just looked out of curiosity. We've been shipping V3 since Mitaka.
That's a good long time. Did you? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, people should be pretty used to it by now.
That's longer than some projects.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. So let me just so this doesn't slip through the cracks, right? We still need a volunteer who wants to handle the Cinder side. So think about it, and I will obviously remind everybody about that on Friday when we do some more general Cinder sessions. Okay, great. Next up is Eric telling us about the status of his Mypy effort, which is actually all of ours, but he's been doing all the work. And what we need to do next to keep this going. What's good about it? Well, I'm sure Eric's going to say this, right? He's caught a few bugs just by doing this that hadn't been otherwise reported, but were obvious bugs. So it is definitely worth taking advantage of typing. Okay, Eric.
Yeah. So, excuse me. I don't really want to spend too much time on the sales pitch part of this again, unless anybody desperately wants that. But I've been working for a little while, basically on trying to get a useful initial baseline of coverage in areas where it seems like it will pay off first to do this. Generally, that's looking at things like parameters and return values of method calls, not getting too bogged down in full coverage of all lines of code. I mean, where that's been reasonable, I'll kind of take a stab at it, but it's I've kind of been aiming to not necessarily hit full coverage in each pass. So I'm kind of going a file or a couple related files at a time with this. My concern is that if I make too in depth of hitting every single thing in a file at a time, the stuff's going to be really hard to review, and while other changes are happening, it's going to be really hard to make sure we don't mess up something with merge conflicts. And so I'm still sticking very much to the kind of hit all the interesting surface spots approach first. So for me, I mean, that's, in some cases, I'll run an automated tool to try to hash out, there's a tool you can run that'll generate annotations based on unit tests. It will generate stuff that's completely wrong because it'll be full of mocks and stuff, but it'll at least give you a hint. So usually I'll do something like that and then go in by hand and tune it up, or just do it by hand to start with and run the Mypy HTML report with our tox environment. You can run tox-e Mypy and get an HTML report of coverage that's got colors showing per file and per line coverage info.
Do you mind if I ask a couple of quick questions on that? We added Mypy to our Pep 8 job on the Nova CLI, but we don't actually run the Mypy checks over any of the unit tests. Are you actually also doing type checking in your unit tests, or are you just doing it on the functional code?
No, just on the actual code. I kind of decided early on that doing it in the unit tests is probably not a reasonable time investment.
Yeah, because we kind of came to the same conclusion, although that was one of the things we wanted originally to use it for, was we've had a few bugs that we thought we had test coverage for originally. And then we determined that the tests were passing, but they're passing the wrong data types. And the data types that are passing, weren't using like OVOs or using like dictionaries. They weren't actually doing the right checks on like, is this a valid UUID or something like that. But we didn't find a reasonable way to allow you to still use marks and not have to jump through hoops, but also get typing information that worked with the unit tests. So.
Yeah, I think we had a similar issue with unit test quality in Cinder, and the most useful part so far that we've found to go after that is to just try to do better with auto-specking and mocks, where I know Gorka looked at this a little bit and a few people have poked at it. There's actually a patch up, just as an aside, there's a patch from like 2 years ago that's on the Cinder tree where somebody tried to add auto-spec stuff all over the place. And it might be worth looking at it and trying to revive some of it. But that, I'm not really trying to get into unit test concerns with this. I think this does probably fulfill a lot of the same goals that we have with our Pylant job. It's the same kind of concept of a static code analysis tool that will shake out bugs, not based on you having gone and written a unit test for it, which is a lot of the value of this. And I did totally steal the script stuff from Nova to drive this, by the way. So that was handy.
Yeah. Well, so we have actually found a couple of things where we have found code paths that we realized it was possible for a variable that we were using to be uninitialized by the time we got there, just because it was set inside some ifs, and then it caught that when we put in the type checks, because it said, no, this should be optional. Yeah. But we're like, no, this should always be set. And then we traced through and found the bug because of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of places I've found potential bugs that are not obvious if you can really hit them or not like that. But it's shaking all that kind of stuff out does seem to promote just better structured, cleaner code that's going to be less likely to have bugs anyway, which I think is kind of a nice side effect of this. So I don't know, I'm kind of just, whenever I feel like it, wandering by and putting together another patch in this series. The pile of them is getting pretty large, if you see my link there. And the thing about this is they kind of depend on each other, because if you know, they all have to converge into agreement on types, right? So, so I'm doing it mostly as a single series just to prevent issues as far as what it can get merged. But most of these patches,
we took a different approach, which was we decided when we were getting rid of like root wrap and sticks, we had patches that just specifically did that. For the Mypy stuff, we decided not to have patches specifically for it, and basically just encourage people whenever they're writing new patches and touching a function, if it doesn't have type hints on it, just add them as you're going. The disadvantage of that is obviously on backports, you may not necessarily want to bring back the type hints as part of the backport, but that way we didn't mess up the Git tree, or like the Git plane, basically.
Yeah, I think the thing is, you have to have enough type annotations in your kind of utility functions and manager stuff for it to really check against much. I mean, I do think it would be great if people added it to new incoming code, but at the moment, if you do that, it doesn't really check a whole lot other than, you know, just the piece of code that you are submitting. And I haven't tried asking for strategies around that yet. I've just been trying to get to a baseline of kind of hitting a lot of the main paths in the utility stuff and the volume manager.
I wonder if we should have a festival of Mypy reviews next week or something, and just try to knock these out, because we did have that one meeting, but a lot of it was just understanding Mypy and looking at it. So maybe at this point, if we just commit ourselves to just knocking these out, you know, we can take it.
Yeah.
And just.
Yeah, I don't really know if there's anything that would help reviewers. I think a lot of it is just understanding enough about how this works to kind of understand the risk assessment of these changes, which is that most of it is not stuff that's going to affect runtime anyway, and the parts that will kind of jump out if you are looking at the code. But yeah, I mean, I'm all for trying to help reviews get done. I'm not really sure what would help that happen right now.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking for me personally, it would help if I just committed time to doing just this. And one way to do that is to just publicly say, let's meet and do this. So I may just organize that, and then if I'm the only one who shows up, that's fine, because at least I'll be doing my part. All right, so I'll send something out. I'll check. I don't know if there are any conflicts with next Friday. We just had I don't want to interrupt the Festival of Extra Small Reviews, because that's been going pretty well. I mean, I don't know if you looked at the Cinder channel last Friday afternoon, it was like around 5 p.m. Eastern time. Suddenly there was just like 50 merges. So that was kind of cool to see.
Yeah.
Well, they've had a good run, the extra small festival. So maybe it's Mypy's turn.
Yeah. But I'm thinking all right. Let me, anyway, proposal is let's do it in our usual slot, but next Friday. So if people could check their calendars later, actually I should put this on the Etherpad. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jay. Okay. So it'll be next Friday, which is April 30th. And we usually meet, 1,400 to 1,600 for the Festival of Reviews. So later, check your schedule, see if that works. Otherwise, we'll come up with something else. But yeah, it'd be nice to get these out of the way.
Yeah, so I'll just note that I'm still figuring out best approaches on a couple of things. Cinder objects are an area that's just kind of tricky because they're all dynamically built and you have to kind of handle them special ways as types. I've been doing it kind of the laziest way possible so far, but I suspect I may eventually get into some further thought on making type classes for objects, or if we should tweak certain things or what. Because they get weird, because when you when you just run something like Mypy, cinder.objects.volume doesn't even exist like as a class because it's dynamically built when you initialize the object system. So then if you want to refer to it, you have to refer to it with a type alias, or maybe I'll end up making type variables to have a clean way to do this later or whatever. But then for that to actually work to its full extent, you're going to have to know what all the fields are inside of that class, which aren't parsable, if you haven't initialized the object system. And I've got stuff right now where it works because you can reference cinder.objects.volume and it'll just know that that's what that is without knowing much about what's in it. But there's going to be a little bit of learning and investigation on the best way to do things like that. And then the other kind of area that I'm still hashing out is how to best handle libraries that we import that aren't annotated with anything, which is most of them currently, of course. There's a few different potential strategies there. I mean, at some point, I need to go talk to the Oslo guys and see if they want me to add annotations to Oslo libraries or if they are interested in that at all. I'm kind of taking the extreme point of view that this is the future of Python code for my interests, but that is not a universal view in the Python world. So we can go to libraries and try to add them. I actually have a patch up right now that will just look at the Oslo libraries that we import, and it will run a stub generator that will generate annotations based on the code. And that seems to be accurate enough to be very useful for the Cinder case. I'm sure that there are reasons to question whether that's the best idea in the long run, but it definitely does basically work. So that when we get to reviewing things, that is, I'll put a link here. That's an interesting one to kind of figure out. And other than that, we probably should go ahead and land the Zool experimental job because why not? There's been a patch for that sitting there for a little bit. But other than that, most of the patches are just things in progress that have some decent coverage. There's a few that are in merge conflict that were either just kind of a first stab at it that didn't get too far or still being worked out, but the main series is in okay shape, I think.
Okay, great.
So yeah, oh, and I started this on OSBrick too, which I mean, it's the same approach. And I see that my query in Garrett that I posted does not actually work to show the OSBrick patches for whatever reason. But I submitted some for that as well. And I don't want to get too far into it today unless people really care, but I've been doing some reading into how this type annotation support in Python is changing over time. And there's some interesting ways that it improves once we get to like only supporting 3.9 and newer and that kind of thing. So I'm kind of tracking strategies on that stuff as well. But for now, I don't know. I've been poking at this long enough that I could just sit here and ramble about it forever. But I guess if anybody has any particular questions, you go with that instead.
This seems like a decent candidate that if I have some spare time, I could look at doing this kind of thing to the RBDI SCSI client too, since Cinder's kind of in charge of that now.
Yeah,
that'd
that
be
was
nice.
pretty cool.
Cool. Any final remarks? So if you have time, you don't have to wait for the Festival of Mypy to review these, but we'll get that set up, and probably next week we can devote some time to knocking these out. Thanks, Eric.
Sure.
All right. Now I think I'm going to probably move the quotas testing because Yvonne, I think, is still at the Verizon meeting. So.
I'm here, by the
Oh,
way.
okay. Hey. Hi, Yvonne.
Hi, guys.
Okay, so then let's talk about quotas testing. Okay, so Orca submitted a whole bunch of patches to try to fix some quota bugs, and he's got plans to try to simplify our quotas code, which should help reduce bugs further. So what we'd like to do is get some testing so we've got a baseline and can start detecting problems and or regressions and the usual stuff. Now, Vaughn, you had mentioned that possibly we could use Rally to try to. So the problem with the quotas testing is you got to do a whole bunch of stuff to exercise the code with a bunch of users and and so we need a way to do that. And Yvonne suggested Rally might be a way to do this. Were you able to get an example of a Rally test that we could possibly steal from, or?
So it's pretty hard to provide one example which fits all our needs, because, as you said, quotas code is very complicated and it executes a lot of things. And in general, Rally supposed to test APIs only, so we can't say that this test will test only quota APIs, because Rally use REST API. So it will use Cinder client. But what can we do? We can resync our current tests and probably add more concurrency, because usually Rally tests do some low concurrence on gates, but we can increase them. It could lead to some issues with backends. I don't know if we can create 10 or 2. Okay, we can create 10 for sure, but 20 or 50 volumes creation could be an issue on gates. So we need to think about if our fake driver is still working. In the past, long time ago, I used it for Rally tests for API performance, but it was about 5 years ago, something like it, and I'm not sure that this driver is working now. Of course, it should be pretty easy to fix it.
Okay, and I think maybe what we should do is just brainstorm what kind of tests we want, and then see what we can do to actually do that. So, for instance, how many? I'm assuming we would need multiple users doing stuff.
Yeah, at least 5 or 10 users should create, delete volumes and snapshots.
Okay.
So we can check what open issues with quotas, and if there is some issue like during snapshot deletion we've got quota error, we have to increase concurrency and create more snapshots. if you've got issues for volumes or backups, we need to use concurrency for volumes and backups tests.
So I guess one thing we can do is when we set up the tests, we make the quotas artificially low so that they're going to exceed it quickly, or is that not a good idea?
Yes, by default we've got about 10 volumes, 100 gigabytes or 10 gigabytes,
Yeah.
and 10 snapshots. Yeah, so we need to increase it in 10 times, I guess. But so increase quota on gate, it's not an issue at all. But I'm not sure that we can create 100 volumes of LVM or CF on our gates. But could be pretty simple for CF with oversubscription ratio, because empty volumes does not weight anything on CF. Few kilobytes, I guess, or megabytes.
Well,
Yeah, same thing for LVM. Sorry.
Well, we did quite a long time ago make the fake volume driver for testing API things like this.
Yeah, I remember. I fixed it.
Oh, okay. So I was thinking that a lot of these tests could be done with that.
Yeah, that's what I suggested. But we need to check if this driver is working now. But if not, it should be really easy to fix it.
About managed and unmanaged operations.
Okay, for fake
If we
drivers,
use,
we can do anything because it just adds records to the database. Or
So
yes, we can implement the manage and unmanage on the fake driver as well. It will do nothing, but at least the APIs are being called, and we can track if the quota is doing its thing. So
not only API, it will call message bus tools will be involved.
The manage unmanaged stuff, I think we fixed some quota bugs in that area if I remember correctly, but I think going for the automated testing on that is way lower priority than the high volume kind of volume creation, deletion, snapshot stuff, because it's I suspect that a lot of the value is to hash out the kind of API service database objects layer kind of issues that we don't really need to worry about the managed stuff to find, at least the more significant ones.
From the bugs I've been fixing, I've realized that many of them are related to temporary resources, to operations with temporary resources that fail in the middle, and then we clean up manually things. We also had, I think, some stuff on migration. So besides there were some on concurrent volume creation and snapshot creation. Those should be fixed, and it could be good to have them. But I think probably there are fewer cases than we think on that area, that in all the other Cinder areas where we are not doing things correctly. For example, when we were retyping a volume with a snapshot, not a retype with migration, just retyping, then our quota would be messed up.
Right, but that's not the kind of bug I don't think that the rally testing is aiming to find, as far as I understood the plan.
Yes. But since I think the topic was also on generic quota testing, right? On the rally. So I wanted to point out that there will probably be some bugs that Raleigh will be able to find out, but most of the bugs I fixed are not in those areas.
I mean, so just to kind of clarify what I was getting at, there's kind of two classes of bugs here, I think. There's the logical ones where we create some temporary thing and we just don't handle it right. And then there's the things kind of work until you do it 100 times simultaneously and then it all breaks. And I think the approaches for how to find those are kind of different activities was all I was getting at.
Yes, I agree with Eric.
And should we get these two types of tests that they are different and they are handling different under a common job for quota testing? Or because in our general Tempest test, we don't check quota in any way, and I think we should have some kind of job that does certain operations and confirm that things look good. Or maybe we just run the whole Tempest suite and confirm that the quota after we complete is fine. Maybe that's, even if we don't fail the job because of the quota, kind of quota report, when we start where we finish or something like that.
We need to be careful with such job. If we test quotas with Tempest, we need to be sure that there are no issues with Tempest tests, because in the past I faced a lot of bugs in Tempest code and it didn't clean up resources which was created for startup or user test. So we can be sure that if there was no volumes and after Tempest we've got no volumes and all quota is free, it's okay. But if we've got quota usage after Tempest, we need to be sure that it's quota issue, it's not Tempest issue.
Yeah, we can probably
maybe fix it already. I don't know. We need to check.
No, but that's a very good point. I can probably create a simple script that runs each of the independent Tempest tests, and after each one, it confirms that the quota is fine, so that we confirm that at least the cleanup in Tempest is fine before we run anything else. Yeah, that's a good point, to confirm that the cleanup in Tempest is correct.
Yeah.
And fix any cases where it's not.
Yes, in that case, we can be sure that we test quotas, not Tempest.
Okay. Well, it might be, since we got Tempest tests in place, that might be the place to start here, is to just get the quick baseline.
I look into the to differentiate, like Eric was saying, the two cases. I will look into confirming that the cleanup of the individual tests look fine, and find if there is an easy way to add the checks, like some kind of easy report that the quota is fine after each one.
Yeah, I guess either that or yeah, I don't know what would happen if we ran Tempest tests that didn't do any of their own cleanup, but only create, operation delete explicitly. Anyway, we'll have to. I think, you volunteered to do something, Gorka, so I should just let you do it without any suggestions.
No. Suggestions are welcome. For example, Ivan mentioned one that I probably would have found, because my suggestion was confirm that after you run everything, it looks good, your quota. But Ivan raised a very good suggestion. Before doing that, make sure that the tests are doing proper cleanup.
Yeah.
So yeah, otherwise I will go crazy. So yeah, those are the two items I will look into, that we are doing proper cleanup in our campus tests, the storage ones, and then try to add it to the gate to see how many times we end up with the wrong quota.
Okay.
Which is the first step to one of the two areas where we can have problems. The concurrency part, like Eric said, that's probably a rally thingy.
Okay. Well, it's good. I mean, once we have something in place, it'll be, make it easier to iterate, to add more things as we go. All right, thanks. Any general comments or remarks or anything?
Yeah, my question,
Okay.
on the rally, is somebody going to be working on that or looking into that?
I will look on it.
Thank you.
I just checked current job and it looks like it doesn't use concurrency. Yeah. So it's no concurrency at all, only 2 or 3 requests, concurrent requests. So it's not what we want to test now. And I will test if our fake Java works.
I guess when we meet with Nova later today, we could ask them if they have any kind of high concurrency tests. I imagine they must have something. I wonder how they test their quotas.
Well, they no longer use this code. They have a specific service for all the quota stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
As I remember, Neutron has voting rally job. Maybe they got something useful for us. No, Neutron OBN, non-voting. Yes, Neutron rally task is voting. Let's check. We definitely test more than we've got. Okay, I will take a look on Neutron tests.
All right, great. Okay, any other comments before we move on?
So I had a related question to quotas. I remember there was one effort with Oslo limits to like centralize quotas with Keystone. Does anyone know about that effort? Like, where is it right now? Or are we going to do that?
Yeah, I don't remember the status of the unified quotas. And from what I looked into, when I started working on this, I also had a quick look at that. And from I could gather on the general idea, it looked like Like it could be race, we would have races all over the place using that kind of service where you request outside. The implementation looked like it would be terrible for us, and we would end up with races all over the place. I don't know if they are working on fixing it or if anybody is even using it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I hadn't. I think the idea was it was just the limits that would be stored in Keystone, so they shouldn't change very often. And then the services would keep track of the quotas and the usages.
And also the benefit of that project validation, like they know which project exists in Keystone. So yeah.
Well, it's kind of nice for operators because everything's in one place when they set the limits instead of going to each service. But anything else? Okay, thanks. All right, so we got some ideas and some action items, so that's good. Okay, so next up is Eric talking about the volume driver classes. Does anyone want to take a break? It's 14:25. We could take a break till 14:30, or we could just go. Got to talk fast though, or we're going to lose our break time.
I could use a quick break.
All right, let's. I'll stop the recording, and we'll pick up at 14:30. Somebody please remind me to make sure I start it up again when we start. All right, so see you in 4 minutes.